Welcome to the Get Over Yourself podcast. This is Brad Kearns.
There's no way we can run off. We can't outrun a diet. This cannot be right. You know, I've always been a guy that just questions everything. You know, it's like, well, wait, that doesn't seem to make sense. Why? You know, and whenever you start digging into that, you start learning more and more that you weren't getting the real story.
Here's a quick thank you to our sponsors. They make this show possible and the tremendous production behind it online and in audio. Thank you, wildideabuffalo.com. Grass-fed, locally raised on the Great Plains for the last 130,000 years. Quit eating that junk food feedlot cattle and get some quality meat into your life. And thank you, DNAfit.com. Cutting-edge genetic testing, delivering customized diet and exercise recommendations for your peak performance. Use the discount code GOY30. Get over yourself. Integro Probiotics make this fabulous liquid probiotic high potency. It's called Flourish, so your microbiome can flourish. Gut health is everything. Get started. Visit ENTEGROhealth.com. And Tribali Foods, pre-made, creatively flavored hamburger and chicken patties. When you're in a rush, drop one down, fry it up. It's delicious. TRIBALI. And Almost Heaven. That's the name of my sauna. These are beautiful home-use saunas made of real wood, shipped to your door, easy to assemble, and then you are rocking. That's right, I'm going from chest freezer cold therapy into the hot barrel sauna. Check them out at almostheaven.com. And the Primal Blueprint online multimedia educational courses. To go primal, go keto, get a stand-up desk going, master the challenge of endurance training. Go to bradkearns.com and click on the links to learn more about these courses. If you're sick of my voice on the podcast, you can now get sick of my face too on the videos. And ancestral supplements. This is grass-fed liver, organ meats, and bone marrow delivered in a convenient gelatin capsule. Don't stress about cooking liver anymore. Just pop some pills or throw capsules into a smoothie every day like me. And now on to our show. Hey, it's Brad. Very excited to introduce my show with the one and only Vinnie Tortorich, America's celebrity trainer, the host of the very popular Fitness Confidential podcast, author of that best-selling book, Fitness Confidential. And let me tell you something, you're going to enjoy this show because this guy is the real deal. He shoots straight. He has no problem speaking his mind. He can tackle controversial topics in a straight, direct manner that's very refreshing in this day and age of the manufactured performances and the posturing. Such a down-to-earth guy. I mean, he's been working with Hollywood celebrities forever and has a very prominent position in the fitness industry and been around Hollywood forever. But he's just a super down-to-earth and genuine guy, full of life and enthusiasm. And man, this guy was born for podcasting. I have to say that first, we recorded a very lengthy show for his channel, which you can go listen to, Brad and Vinnie, and we get going on all kinds of topics like the dysfunctional attitudes that helicopter parents have and the corruption in NCAA Division I sports. So we were highly, highly warmed up when we pushed the record button for this episode of my show, and somehow we jumped right into politics, which was funny because at the end of Vinnie's other show, he says, "This is not a political podcast. I don't want to go there." And I say the same thing. It's not necessary. You can go listen to political podcasts. But we went there anyway. So we got in some nice jabbering about our wonderful President of the United States right now and all that kind of fun stuff before we settled in to talk about the matters at hand, including his amazing background in the fitness world, coming from New Orleans as a personal trainer and then plunging right into Hollywood, and how he got his break, how he got his start in Hollywood is an absolutely mind-blowing anecdote that all young, aspiring people in fitness or in any business would be well served to listen to very carefully. It's such an amazing character-revealing insight. You're not going to believe this story that involves Playboy playmates and helping people lose massive amounts of weight. going all in, all the way, even when his clients couldn't afford to pay him, and just coming from his heart and really, truly wanting to help people. So you listen to that story and you get a great sense of who this guy is and what he's all about, and how he still walks his talk today. I mean, he talks about the beginning of his podcast, which was just done as a folly on a whim, and he and his sidekick, Anna, who's hilarious, you'll listen to them on Fitness Confidential, they were so certain that no one was listening that they started goofing off and doing some nasty, dirty joke type of stuff, just having fun with it and not taking themselves too seriously. And then they discovered that they were actually a very highly rated podcast on iTunes. And then they started to get into this fast track where now it's one of the top ranked health and fitness shows perennially. And of course, adding more and more content to the channel. So it was a great privilege to sit down with Vinnie and have him go out of his way and take that time during the off hours. We plunged into, family time, dinner time, but he didn't care, man. He was just wound up, and we went all the way and talked about all kinds of amazing topics, ultra marathon cycling. Oh my goodness. And also him putting together this amazing insight, this epiphany that kind of was a cross between the Atkins diet and the modern notion of the compensation theory, where exercise does not measurably contribute to your weight loss goals. All this stuff is being discussed right now as breaking news. And this was 30 years ago, where this guy started to get the notions and have that creative mindset where he's asking questions and second guessing the conventional wisdom. And boy, it all started. He's a guy that was early on in this game and still going strong with his wonderful no sugar, no grains trademark phrase, the immediate one-liner that you can share to ask what this primal paleo low carb scene is all about. The first step is ditch sugars and ditch grains, and then you'll lose weight. And that's been Vinnie's game forever. Just doing the best he can to help not only the Hollywood celebrities, but the ordinary people listening to his show. No sugar, no grains. You can't get any more simple than that. Enjoy this show with Vinnie Tortorich of the Fitness Confidential podcast. Oh my gosh, I'm sitting here in beautiful Woodland Hills, California, my hometown, and the town of Vinnie Tortorich.
The town of Robin Wright.
And many other luminaries here. It all happens in Woodland Hills. Vinnie, I'm so glad to catch up with you. We've been hanging for a while with different things happening and joining each other on the podcast and having our fun little dramatic start where I cut out your vitamin pitch on my podcast due to company policy, forgot to tell you, and then rushed through a couple emails saying, sorry, dude, yeah, well, no big deal. And you're like, it kind of was a big deal. And then we had this great connection where I said, I have these opportunities in life to kind of recalibrate me and learn a lesson. And I called you up and I said, hey, dude, you know what? I got to tell you something. I'm really sorry. I appreciate your feedback. You're absolutely right. And boy, it's sort of like breaking the ice from when you're swimming around in the, in the business world and getting mixed messages and weird things like that instead of just cutting to the chase and dealing with stuff,
Well, you see, I think the confusion with that happened, if I'm remembering right, was I was promised, I had my vitamin company coming out and I was promised by someone, oh yeah, come on and promote it. And then, And Mark, Mark said, no, we sell vitamins. Why and they just cut it out. And I was like, hang on, I'll let Mark come on and promote his vitamins on my show. And both you and Mark called and said, hey, we're terribly sorry. And I was like, I love these guys. These are stand-up guys. People don't stand up anymore and admit when they're wrong. Look at what's going on in the world today. All these women are coming out and accusing this guy Weinstein of, he did this, he did that, and if it was one woman or two women, you could go, okay, is this guy really? But all of these women have very similar stories, and they're all going, this is what happened, and you go, wow, this guy was a real creep, right? Yet he's going, I didn't do anything wrong. How do you not know you didn't do something wrong? And, I'm not comparing you and Mark to Weinstein, but that's the world we live in where you guys went, oh my God, yeah, we told this guy one thing, we did something else, but somehow it got crossed up with the person I was talking to that booked me for the show and you, and nobody really knew.
Well, you bring to mind. I'm not going to make this a political podcast, just like Vinny says on the Fitness Confidential.
And then I make it political.
It brings to mind the president, where he can stand up there and lie, and has been caught lying. And there's a website that says what percentage of statements come out of his mouth as a lie, and it's a world record of 71% or whatever.
Right.
But we're existing in that world where this guy is capable of getting elected. Deepak Chopra is not a political guy either. I heard him on a podcast recently, and he got in some really nice barbs about Trump. And he said this is a sample of this dysfunctional planet, and this dysfunctional narcissist has been able to get elected. And he wasn't trying to be mean. He was just making the observation that this is, how the elections go, and the BS that comes out of the politicians' mouths, and how we vote and process information. It's all short attention span, and social media is dominating, and whoever's on top right now, and we're just constantly overstimulated with these weird influences that throw us off the good old-fashioned values that come from down home Louisiana, or wherever you grew up in a simpler time, where if you broke the neighbor's window, you went over there and knocked on the door and said you're going to take your paper boy money and fix the window. And nowadays the kid would probably sue the neighbor for having the window in the wrong spot. No kidding.
Yeah, pretty much. And speaking of the Trump thing, and yes, I don't do political. I don't care who anyone voted for, and that's not my thing. But I do find it very interesting that he, love him or hate him, he's the commander-in-chief, right? And he's what the world looks at when they look at us. And we travel around the world a lot, and everyone has a lot to say about the guy. And, all I care about is, I don't care who the commander-in-chief is. I don't want to see the guy fail, because if he fails, we fail. Do I believe he should be on Twitter every day? No, not so much. But I don't want the guy to fail. And it seems like most of the country is waiting for him to fail. And I go, well, look at what you guys are asking for. You're asking for you to fail too. That bothers me, that we're there as a country. The other part that bothers me is, I heard this joke the other day, and it seems like this joke is going around a lot. Is that thing on?
Yeah, I'm just turning my volume down.
Okay. This seems to be going around a lot, where they're talking about, Trump is in love with his daughter, or his daughter's in love with him. And you see, it all kind of falls short on me because I don't watch any television. It's just not my thing. I watch stuff on this monitor. It's usually a documentary, so I don't have all the CNNs and Foxes of the world. It just doesn't matter to me. But when you hear through the great, this whole joke about he and his daughter are in love with each other, and they truly want to have sex with each other. Could you imagine if we were saying that about President Obama and one of his daughters? And you see, it wouldn't have worked the other way, but we seem to think it's perfectly fine now that he's in office. And as an American, I don't like that.
Yeah, it's like I'll say, since we're not on a political podcast, I'm extremely liberal. I would classify myself, but I get incensed when I see these liberal spokespeople when they're being inflammatory and posturing and grandstanding in the same manner as Rush Limbaugh. Yes, I totally support and believe their message because it's aligned with my beliefs, but I don't like the gamesmanship and sort of the shock value of the commentators trying to make it a show and a performance. It's we're out of sensibility now.
Can I ask you this question as a liberal? Do you feel like the left has become the right and the right has kind of become the left? Like everyone has flipped the switch somehow?
Yeah, there's some weird issues where the death penalty, right? That's a classic, of a conservative position and a liberal position.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking well, why not just get rid of these guys? And then, the liberal mindset will be like, what are you talking about? That's a disgrace to their human rights. They're human beings. And it's like, yeah, but they killed people. It's not so simple to categorize everything. So I'm kind of, there's that libertarian bent that creeps in on all of us where, we're frustrated with the government. We think they're doing stupid shit with our money. And so, couldn't we just, have everything be a free for all? But I think it's all a matter of striking a balance, especially when it comes to politics, where, the pendulum's swinging this way, then it's swinging back. And thank gosh for democracy, where any kind of crazy shit that Trump does in his years in office, a lot of that stuff will probably be very hard. The Democrats will try to unwind it and get us back to the pendulum swinging the other way. And therefore,
it always happens that way. We go back and forth and all this stuff. And people say, well, why don't you care more about politics? And it's like, look, I can't change it. No matter what we've done in our lives, no matter how much yelling you do on Facebook or whatever, you're not changing anything. I have a friend who's very, very liberal. And I said, I'm not sure if Trump won as much as Hillary lost.
Oh, man. I was listening to the radio on election night. I was driving in Northern California, and I left, my sister's house, and it seemed everyone thought that Hillary was going to win going into the very last night. And then when I left and hit the road, there's there's some uncertainty here. We still are not able to call Wisconsin and all this. And the radio commentator said my most memorable one-liner. He goes, I just want to say, whoever loses this election will go down in history as the worst candidate of all time, because the winner is going to be the worst president of all. These two people had so much dirt and baggage against them, and that was pretty funny. So yeah, whatever.
It's just crazy that we go back and forth with that, and we have to walk away from it at some point. And as I tell my buddy, the liberal, the super liberal, I said, you know what? If you keep messing around like this and trying to impeach this guy, you're going to end up getting him elected again. Why don't you guys go out as a group and find someone who could beat him? That's the way you win. Not by trying, it's kind of like you were talking in the last podcast, a soccer game was going on and there was an infraction and they gave it to the other team on the infraction. You guys are trying to win on an infraction now. That doesn't make Hillary, if you impeach this guy, Hillary still does not become president. Now you have a religious kook running the country. So good luck with either one or whatever you have. And I know this is confusing. It's like, wait a minute, is he right or is he left? No, I'm actually in the middle. I'll just come out and say it. I don't tell anyone which side I'm on. I'm just in the middle. And I love looking at it because everybody is just running scared right now. But you do look around and unemployment is at the lowest it's been in a gazillion years, and the stock market seems to be fine. And all of this is while he's up there tweeting. So maybe tweeting is the way to go. I don't know.
He's having McDonald's hamburgers because he has paranoia about getting poisoned. So he lives on McDonald's hamburgers, apparently.
Is that a fact?
That's what Cardi B told me. Remember when she read a passage from his book on the Grammys? It was classic.
I don't watch TV. I'm not kidding.
No. Go search YouTube for Cardi B audiobook audition for the Trump book. Oh, it's hilarious. And all these celebrities took a turn reading from his audiobook because there's an audio book award. They get a Grammy for the best audio book, and it's a true story. It's not on the TV show because it's not exciting, but it was a joke that the host put up, and it was pretty funny. Yeah. So here we are with fitness expert Vinnie Tortorich, and you can tell we probably got a little warmed up doing a show on his channel and getting off on all these tangents, and we're just true to form here, getting political on our health, fitness, peak performance show. But I want to talk about your podcast, man, because offline we were pondering whether you could be the most prolific podcaster in the world right now, because you do so many shows a week, and a lot of guys do a daily show. There's the entrepreneur show that's 5 minute manager, and these tidbit shows. But you're putting up content where you're banking the hours. You're spending a lot of time in this studio, man.
Yeah, you made me think about it. The Monday show is always like an hour and 20 minutes. The Wednesday show is supposed to be 20 minutes long. It's never shorter than 45 minutes. The Friday show normally goes an hour and a half. The Saturday show, which you were just on, that's supposed to be a 30-minute show. We went well north of an hour. And
we had to correct all these improprieties in society, like the youth sports, the helicopter parents, the NCAA corruption, all that stuff we had to settle, the doping in cycling and other sports.
We ran the gamut on that show, man. At the end of the show, I was going, we need to do a show together. And then I realized I'm already doing 5 shows every week. And that goes on year in and year out. We're at something like close to 1,100 shows.
Yeah, this is like show 1074 was the one I was listening to on the way over here going, wait a second, 1074? That's crazy. So how did this come to be? I mean, one day, once upon a time, how many years ago? Tell me how you started this thing and how it grew to this monster.
Interesting concept. We had the big, I had three things happen in my life. I talk about failure quotient a lot. In 2007, I had cancer. So I was out of work. I've been a fitness trainer here in Hollywood for, 25 years at the point. And I had cancer, so I had to take a long time off. And I was living off of my savings. And then when I came back, it turned out I lived. So yay, I got to live. And then right after that, the writer's strike in LA hit. So when I worked with a lot of people in Hollywood, actors and whatever. And when writers aren't writing, actors aren't acting, and I was out of work. So I went for a long period. It was like the longest writer's strike because at some point, SAG got involved in the same strike. So all of my clients were gone. And I'm looking around going, I need money to pay for cancer, and no one is around to train anymore. So I started picking up what we call lay people, just irregular people with regular jobs.
Extras.
No, like, real estate agents and stuff like that, just anybody who I could train at a reduced rate. I was just trying to bring in income. And then we had the big bubble of 2008. So I went from bad to worse. And I wasn't making money. Literally, I was down to 2 or 3 of my favorite clients, like Howie Mandel. He's a good friend, and he was still a client. And a couple of rock stars who were still on the road. But they're on the road a lot, and I'm only training them when they're off the road. So I was in trouble. And one of my clients, a guy named Dean Laurie, who you may know him from things like Arrested Development and My Wife and Kids and Major Pain. He wrote all that stuff. And he kept saying to me, you should write a book. Just go write a book. And I was like, Dean, I'm not. He goes, no, you wrote a kid's book years ago, and you were good at it. You should do it again. And
he's a writer?
He's a writer and director and producer in Hollywood. The guy basically, he's running shows all the time in Hollywood.
So it's not your grandma saying write a book. It's some writer saying write a book. You better listen.
Yeah. And he was even saying that. He kept saying, most people come to me and want me to write a book for them. I'm telling you, I will help you write a book. And I hemmed and hawed for like 6 or 8 months. And he begged me to start writing notes. So I bought a stack of yellow notepads. They come in a cellophane pack.
I hope the big ones at least, man, not the square ones.
No, it's just, the...
Oh, the legal pads.
Legal pads. The big
not the Post-it notes. You're not doing a book on Post-it notes.
Right there, right there we go. Elbow. And
okay, that's legit. Dr. Seuss writes on legal pads.
Yeah. So I wrote, I kept one in my truck. I had a big Dodge pickup truck. And whenever I had a thought and I would be at a stoplight, I would jot down notes. And I can't type. I'm not really good with the computer. But every night I would take whatever was in my truck. And sometimes it was the back of envelopes. It was a napkin. It was all kinds of stuff. And I would sit at my computer and peck out these notes into Word program or something. Serena came in here and set up Word and go, all right, just press this button and then go and peck your notes into that. And about once a week, Serena would come in and send my notes to Dean, so that I wouldn't accidentally erase them or some weird thing. I'm really that bad with the computer. So that was all going on. One night I'm having a drink with Dean, and he says, you realize you've written almost 45,000 words of notes. Whew. And I was like, really? What does that even mean? He goes, most books are not even 60,000 words anymore. You've written a whole book in notes. And he goes, you've never written the same note twice. And I was like, wow. He goes, as a matter of fact, I've been collecting your notes and putting them in a category. Why don't you come over and we can look at them? So I went over, and the day I went over to look at them, we worked for like 4 hours together. And every day after that, we worked for 2 hours. And at the end of like 5 or 6 months, we had a book. And he took it right over to William Morris. For people not in Hollywood, that's the place, that's where...
Talent agency for various actors, performers, writers, whatever.
Yeah, like
big
the
time.
big place. Yeah. And they said, hey, we know who Vinnie is because he's been training our clients for 25 years. but we Googled Vinnie. He does not exist on the internet. So Dean called me that night and he said, you need to go get famous on the internet.
Quick.
Yeah, like right now, go get famous on the internet. I'm a 50-year-old guy. I'm like 49. I'm like, I'm famous on the internet? How do you do that? Don't you have to like shoot up Columbine? How do you get famous on the internet? So I came home and I pecked into Google how to become famous on the internet. And there was a girl named Jenna Marbles. Do you even remember her?
Sounds familiar.
She had like 5 gazillion hits on YouTube. She was a young girl sitting on the edge of her bed in her bedroom in a bikini, crying and pouting because she didn't get to go to spring break, and she bought this brand new bikini for spring break, and she decided to do a video because she wanted someone to see her new bikini. And I went, okay, I don't have a bikini, so I can't do that. So I clicked on something else, and a guy had a squirrel duct taped to a set of water skis, and he's got the squirrel water skiing behind like a little remote control boat. And I went, okay, I don't have a squirrel, duct tape, or a boat. You know, nothing. I had, so.
You had no game, man.
I had nothing. So the next day, I'm talking to my nephew down in Louisiana, and I'm telling him about my dilemma. And he goes, you should do a podcast. And I said, what is that? I've never even heard these words before. He said, you did a radio show back in New Orleans back in the 80s. I said, yeah, Talking Fitness. It was one of the most popular shows on WSMB. He goes, yeah, I remember I was a little kid and everyone talked about your uncle's a great broadcaster on this thing. He said, that's what a podcast is. And I was like, so explain this pod card again. How does this work? And he goes, podcast, and it's on the computer, and you just put shows up and they're free and people will listen. And you'll get an audience, and then maybe you can sell your book. And I went, okay. So I called my friend. She wasn't a friend. She was a friend of a friend, Anna Vocino. And I said, Anna, you're a voiceover person. Do you have like a recording device of some sort? She said, yeah. Why? I said, you ever hear of something called a podcast? She goes, yeah, we did like 10 of them like a year ago. Me and my husband sat down. They were like, like funny podcasts. Like we did stories. I said, did they go anywhere? She goes, yeah, a bunch of people listened, but that was about it. I said, would you do another one? She said, no. I said, please? And she goes, no, it's a lot of work. And I said, tell you what, Anna, I have a book on PDF. Would you read my book? And she goes, what's it about? I said, health and fitness. She goes, yeah, I need to lose weight. And we're leaving for vacation tonight. And so I came home and said, Serena, you have to send this book in PDF form because I don't know how to do any of this. Send it to this girl, Anna Vocino. And she called me. She was in Hawaii. She called me on the second day. And she said, I've read the entire book. I couldn't put it down. And I will do whatever you want to do.
Wow.
And that's how we started a podcast. She agreed to do 6. So we did all 6 in one day. And I released 3 right away. And then I released another 3 a week later. And then I said to Anna, I said, can we do another 6? And every Sunday we would sit there for 6 hours and do 6.
All in a row.
Yeah, we would just sit there and I would talk for 6 hours. And at some point she would leave the room, go make breakfast for her husband and kid, come back and go, that was funny. And then go run out and make breakfast again. And, lunch, and the family would go off. And we just did that. And we didn't realize it at first, but the show was getting more and more popular because there weren't a bazillion podcasts back then. But we started building an audience. And that's the whole podcast story.
You're talking like health and fitness topics right out of the gate, no sugar, no grains, or what was your angle at the start?
We called it the Angriest Trainer Podcast at first. We changed the name later on to Fitness Confidential Podcast. But we were pretty positive that no one was paying attention whatsoever. And we would spend a whole show just doing smutty type of stuff. Like, I know this is a clean show, so I'll keep this clean. But we did a whole show coming up with every derogatory term we could come up with for a woman's vagina. And that became
early podcasting.
Yeah, because we were certain that no one was listening. And then one day...
So what do you have to lose? Might as well.
Yeah, it was like we were sitting there, just coming up with these horrible terms and laughing about it and the whole thing. And then Anna calls me one day and she goes, we're number 3 on iTunes. And your podcast is new and noteworthy. And I said, well, how many people are listening? She goes, I don't know. Nobody knew at the time. And about 3 months after that, I got a call from a woman, which is odd because now I'm actually part of the show. I got a call from a woman who said she worked for Adam Carolla's podcast. And she said, what kind of numbers are you getting? And I said, I don't know. iTunes doesn't give us numbers. And she goes, you have to be big because you're all over iTunes. So go hook up to something called Libsyn. I was like, how does that, spell that again? How does that work? So we called Rob Walsh over at Libsyn and said, can you put us in your thing? And he goes, yeah. And right away we found out in that first month we had we were doing back then like 1 or 2 shows a week and we had 40,000 downloads or something. And we thought that was like a crazy number back then, and that's how we started figuring out that people were listening. And I started going, and I don't think we should do many of those vagina, but we were already down that road. So we just kept it going,
Maybe that's part of the beauty of it, that it's unfiltered, because we're coming into this world from the mainstream media, which is now, it's so dated and archaic. And it's, you write a book like your book, and you get on, if you're lucky, you get on the Today Show for 4 minutes and they say, tell us about your book. And you have your canned presentation, and then you're gone, and then you're forgotten about. But now you can have this medium where the person can really get to know you and get deep into stuff. I think it's fantastic.
That's very true. We ended up, we were offered 2 book deals, Simon & Schuster and Harper Wave, which is HarperCollins. And both of them were offering me, $20,000, but they wanted me to split the book into 2. So one of them was offering me $40,000 for the 2 books up front. And the other one was offering me $50-something thousand for the 2 books. And I said, but you realize I have a big audience. At the time, I had like 60,000 coming in a month on the podcast. And they were like, we don't even know what a podcast is. And I was like, no, but I think of a football stadium being full of 60,000 people. All of these people are going to buy my book. And they were like, yeah, right, whatever. So I called Dean and I said, Dean, what do you say we self-publish this book? And that's what we did. And the difference between self-publishing and the book has made a lot of money because we get 75% of every dollar. If we had gone with one of those companies, that would have been it, because they will give you the big push for about a month. And then now they're pushing another book. This book has been selling for 5 years now, 5.5 years. And the first year it made an ungodly amount of money, and that wouldn't have happened. But more so than the money, we put it into a lot of people's hands. And that's the big thing. When you could put a book in someone's hands and it could change their life, and we started getting these before and afters that people were sending in, I read your book, I've lost 100 pounds. Then you go, money doesn't matter. This is not about money. The money allowed me to cover my cancer bills and all that. I owed a lot of money to a lot of people, and I don't believe much in God. But boy, something stepped in and helped, And I started looking at that going, holy shit. The universe, so to speak, kind of came in. And I don't believe in all that universe stuff. So the book allowed me to get my life back and then help other people. And that's when I decided, okay, you almost died of cancer. Now you can spend the rest of your life helping other people because you got to live. And been doing that approach ever since.
Well, I think you were doing that beforehand too, and I want you to tell your story about the training the centerfolds to keep trim after they win that big success, and then you had the woman in the office, the afterthought that wasn't a big star, but I want to hear that whole thing because it's such a character revealing insight. It's my favorite thing I heard from you when we talked in the past, and I think it says a lot about you that's where you were coming from the start, and then starting that podcast and doing it for fun and being real and authentic and having some goofy times. And people just are drawn to that because we're so sick of the bullshit. But yeah, take us back to those early days in Hollywood when you came out here and decided to be a trainer.
Yeah, I had been a trainer in New Orleans, from the time I was at Tulane in the early 80s. And it was kind of before trainers were a thing. And I had a degree in physical education and exercise physiology. And, I was just doing my thing. I was also working at Newman School as their strength and conditioning sports.
That's the Cardinal Newman, were the Manning brothers?
Yeah.
Even I've heard of that guy in California, man. That's big time.
Yeah, it's I coached Cooper and also Peyton Manning. Cooper was actually, in my opinion, I think Peyton would say the same thing, was the best athlete of the Mannings.
Wide receiver.
He had a bone marrow problem, and he had to stop playing football. He was at Ole Miss. I actually took that kid on spring break. I used to chaperone those kids, Cooper and all of his friends. That was the good old days. And in '91, I came out here, and I didn't know a soul. And
why'd you come?
The weather. I would come out here to visit. I had a friend that lived out here for a while. He was a chef. And it would rain in New Orleans all winter, and I would come out here with my bike and ride my bike around in midwinter, and I would go, there's no rain, it's not cold, this is great, this is unbelievable. Oh my God, could I possibly move here? I think I'm the only person that moved to LA to be a trainer. Like most people come here to be an actor or something or whatever. I moved here to be a trainer. And couldn't really make money at it at first because didn't know anyone. And someone introduced me, I don't know how, but I got introduced to this woman who worked at Playboy. And her husband was from Louisiana. So someone knew her and the whole thing. And she took me for lunch, and I said, yeah, I'm trying to make it out here, and I don't know anyone. I'm just trying to get some clients. And when I walked her back to her desk that day at Playboy, I met this woman, Dana, who was probably wider than she was tall. And I went, wow. Started talking to Dana, and she's like, yeah, I used to be really thin and the whole thing, and gained all this weight and so on and so forth. And I started working with Dana, and she couldn't afford a whole lot. And back in New Orleans, I was charging $135 a session to be a trainer, which was a lot of money in 1985 in New Orleans. I said, Dana, what could you afford? And she said, how many times a week? And I said, every day. And she goes, it's embarrassing, I can't. I said, you have to pay me something, because if I do it for free, you're not going to respect it. What amount of money can you give me? She goes, I know these trainers out here make $150, $200 an hour. I said, no. I'm not asking you what you think I should make. I'm asking you what hurts. And I said, I need to see you 5 days a week. And she said, can I get back to you? I said, yeah, here's my phone number. Call me. She called me a few days later, and she goes, this is really embarrassing. I said, Dana, shut up. Just tell. $15, she says.
She did that. She ran some numbers at home on the spreadsheet.
She did.
Right.
I said, great. $15 due at the end of every week. And I said, if you ever miss, unless you're really sick or something for real, I'm done. I need your full attention, and you have to eat. I'm going to tell you what to eat. I'm going to tell you everything. But you have to pay me $15 for every time at the end of the week. Sure. And I said, if anyone ever asks what you're paying, tell them you don't know. Tell them that a friend of yours is paying or something. Just don't, because... And I took a ton of weight. I took, 150, 160 pounds off of her. She looked amazing. It was this beautiful body underneath all of this fat. And people around Playboy started taking note. And a couple of the VPs started noticing, and then, hey, can you come over to my house? And yeah, I come over and help you out. And started training a couple of those. And one of them knew that Playboy had a problem, because they would take these girls from the Midwest and they would make them playmates. And next thing you know, they're getting wined and dined by every sitcom star there is, right? So these girls start gaining weight. And that's not good for business, because Playboy has them under contract for 2 years after they do their centerfold. And the last thing they wanted was fat playmates. So one of the VPs of the Playmates said, hey, would you consider working with a couple of these girls, and let's see what we can do? And that was my end. That's how it happened. I couldn't have planned that any other way. I mean, it was just happenstance.
Yeah, I mean, you don't believe in the woo-woo signs from the universe, but the fact that you had the time and energy to take someone who was, not a prominent person that was going to leverage you into your own career success. Right. You just wanted to help that lady, and especially the story about the money. I didn't know that, but that's, it's beautiful, man. And like if you're a young struggling trainer listening to the show and realizing what you're really all about as a personal trainer, or even as a realtor, where you're driving these people around and you're showing them all these houses, and they're not ready to make a commitment, but you're in that career, and your purpose is to help someone realize the American dream. You don't judge it or think that it was a failure day because you didn't make an offer. You're just in it for the total commitment, and then great things happen. An amazing story. So you kind of zeroed in on the weight loss expertise from the very start, and you have this tagline on the hats, NSNG, no sugars, no grains, which I think is, of all the primal paleo ancestral health community, that's the most brilliant trademark and succinct encapsulation. So when we're sitting on an airplane seat and you say what you're all about, I'm all about NSNG, and then that's the opening where the person gets the immediate insight. So how'd you come up with that? And where did that start to come into the picture? Was that Dana's message 5 days a week, or how did that go?
It was. Wow. I don't know how deep you want to get into this, but I started looking at sugar first, very, very early on. I was always interested in how people got fat, because my feeling was when people back in the 80s, you didn't see many fat people, but every now and then somebody would you would go, couldn't they see that they were getting fat, and why couldn't they do something about it? Or, it's not like they woke up one morning, poof, fat, And I started thinking about it. It's like, well, what if they're getting fat in spite of themselves? Just despite everything they're doing, they're still getting fat, right? Nobody goes, hey, I want to be fat. I want to be unhealthy. I want to feel like I'm going to pass out every time I bend over to tie my shoes. No one has that feeling, right? And then I started looking at different things and thinking about different things. And I remember football coaches in high school going, well, we got to get some corn in that boy. I got to beef him up a bit. Oh, get some potatoes in that boy. It was always eat starchy stuff to gain weight, those big corn-fed linemen from the Midwest, you would always hear this stuff. And when I was going through labs one day, at Tulane, we had someone hooked up. We were doing VO2 max and this kind of thing. And we would get athletes from the track team and all this kind of stuff. And we would hook them up. It looks like a Gatorade commercial. You got all the EKG stuff on them. You have the mask over their face, catching their respiration. We would prick them in the finger to get the lactose level and the whole thing. It wasn't like today where you can almost just measure it with a wand. We had these people hooked to 1,000 things. And I always noticed that we would have these people at anaerobic thresholds, sometimes for like 28 minutes, 30 minutes, till their legs gave out. And I would look at the calorie expenditure, and it was always something like 246 on some of these well-heeled athletes, 285, this kind of thing. And I would sit there and go, we talk a lot about calorie in, calorie out. And I know this experiment isn't about that, but I'm always that curious guy going, I know we're not looking at this number, but I'm looking at this number. No one else seems in the lab, they're just seeing what his anaerobic threshold is because they're trying to calculate something else. I would look at that number and go, calorie in, calorie out, and we're telling people to exercise to lose weight is not adding up. And
wow.
I was sitting on a bench outside of Tulane one day with this girl, Linda, and we were having some lunch, and Linda had a bag of M&Ms. And remember when M&Ms, they didn't come in a supersized bag, just a regular size bag? It was just like a handful of M&Ms.
Fits in your palm.
Yeah.
The bag.
The whole bag was a serving. Now we have super duper size, buy a pound at a time or whatever. That's a serving. And Linda, after she had her sandwich, she was shaking out some M&Ms. She goes, would you like some? And I went, yeah. So I grabbed the bag and I shake some out in my hand. And I look at the back and I said, huh. And she goes, what? I said, I'm just looking at the calories on this, just total calories. She goes, yeah. I said, total calories is close to 200. And she goes, yeah. I said, we just had that guy up in the gym and he...
running his ass off.
Yeah, he was about to throw up by the time we stopped that treadmill. And he barely got over 200 calories, and She goes, yeah. I said, so how in the hell can we tell people, because Jane Fonda was just coming in with the aerobics and the whole thing. I said, we're telling people they can exercise fat away, but you can exercise for an hour. You eat a bag of M&Ms, you're almost right back where you started. I said, how far do people go when they jog? She goes, I don't know, 3-4 miles. I said, yeah, 3-4 miles. That's not even a bag of M&Ms. What about the breakfast you had that morning? What about the grits? We were in Louisiana. What about this? What about that? You have French fries with this. There's no way we can run off. We can't outrun a diet. This cannot be right. And it was my first inclination that calorie in, calorie out. And I knew about Atkins because he was hot for 5 minutes in the 70s. And I would think about Atkins, and I read something from this longevity group where these guys, they figured with longevity, if they just cut out carbohydrates, they can live to be 110. And they said one of the byproducts of this group was that nobody had any fat on them and they didn't exercise. And I'm thinking about all this, but then there were all those nagging problems. Cholesterol, heart disease. I was just hanging on to all that going, well, this all has to be true, right? I mean, this is what the guy...
Fat's bad, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, how is it that fat can be so good, yet at the same time be so bad? It just wasn't jiving with me. And I'm just a curious guy that over the years, I would just play with it. And every time a socialite in New Orleans, once I started my training business, would say, I need to fit in this dress by this date, I would say, okay, every carb, gone. Grits, gone. Bread, gone. Pasta, out of here. Potatoes, gone. Well, what am I supposed to eat? Red meat, pork, chicken, eat that. Eat some eggs. Oh, it's cholesterol. Were you trying to kill me? And I would always say to him, it won't kill you to do it for 3 weeks.
Ooh, try it out.
Just give it a shot. And that's how I started playing around with it.
Whew, this is incredible because you're basically, you're putting together the insights like a scientist and kind of blending those Atkins insights were put out there that if you reduce your insulin, you're gonna burn body fat. But the exercise part, I mean, this is over 30 years ago now.
Yeah.
And we're now finally, you can Google the compensation theory of exercise and the science showing. There was a Time magazine article maybe a couple years ago. You can Google this and it says the exercise myth was the cover story on Time. And then the subtitle said something like, we were wrong about exercise. It actually doesn't really help you lose weight because it creates a compensatory increase in appetite and caloric expenditure, and you actually become lazier throughout the day because you did your workout consciously and subconsciously. Like, oh, I did my workout this morning, so I'm just going to, sit here. My favorite anecdote from when I was a triathlete and training all day and putting in the hours and the 200-300 miles a week on the bike, I would drive to the mailbox to get my mail. It was 0.6 of a mile.
Wow. And
there was a little hill on the route. So, but I just get home from an 84-mile ride and I'm recovering and taking my nap and having my fuel and all that. And I need to go get in a car to go get the mail, not walk there for a nice stroll and look at the stars or whatever, take the dog out for a little jaunt. But I had done so much training that the rest of my life I was a complete deadbeat. I mean, the Tour de France guys are famous for this. They lose bone density in 3 weeks' time. They have a huge reduction in bone density because they're never standing up. They're either lying down or sitting in a bus or sitting on a bike. So that's amazing that you put those two together.
Yeah, but my big problem was I thought that if people did it for long periods, that it would kill them because all the science just went in that direction. And then the other side was the athletic side. Well, if you want to be an athlete, you had to have carbohydrates and you had to have a great amount of them. So I was kind of a two-faced trainer. If you came to me and told me you wanted to run a marathon, I would put you on high carbs. I was no different than anyone else. I would go, look, I get that fat is good, but fat is not what you need. Carbs are what you need. So, and I did the same thing when I was doing all of my ultras. I would live on carbohydrates. But then at the end of the year, when I would go 3 or 4 months of just relaxing and not doing any ultras, I would go, okay, time to get off the carbs because I don't want to get fat for January when I get back on the bike again.
It's so common. If you're not an ultra endurance athlete, I mean, this happens to people. They put on 10 pounds like in nobody's
10,
business.
20, 30.
Brutal.
Just go right up. And I didn't want that to happen while I wasn't doing all the extra exercise. So I would just go back to my high-fat diet again. And people go, how did you figure out the high-fat part? And it's like, well, because if you just eat protein, you're still hungry. You had to eat something with the protein. And I would never, I would never go ketogenic back then, but I wouldn't have French fries or anything like that.
Right.
I would have rice, or I would have every now and then a potato or something, but it was mostly fat so that I wouldn't gain weight. And then I would wait and, I would go, okay, I made it through Thanksgiving. I didn't have any of the junk for Thanksgiving. Now I'm going to skate. And for Christmas, I'm going to my mom's house. I'm going to and then I would probably gain 5 pounds between Christmas and New Year's. And then it would happen that fast, eating the pecan pies and all the stuff that you remember mom for. I remember just going through that holy hell and then try to take it off in January when I got back on the bike.
So you're getting these insights yourself with your own road testing of the different fuel sources. I wonder how that one-liner went down, 25 years ago, that you're eating a lot of fat so that you don't gain weight. That's absolutely mind-blowing that long ago.
It was, and a lot of people would go, oh, this is just Atkins, right? And I would go, yeah, Atkins, that's what we're doing. It was a little different than Atkins when I was prescribing, and then they would go, doesn't Atkins cause gout? No, not that I know of. I read a thing that says Atkins causes gout, It wasn't called low carb back then. It was called Atkins, And I heard you can only stay on Atkins for 30 days and then you gain all the way back plus some more. Well, yeah, if you stop and you start eating ice cream again, then of course, it was just this crazy time,
Yeah, our minds are not open to these things. I mean, even today in 2018, I'm sure listeners to the show of the Fitness Confidential or this show are a little bit more open-minded and have been exposed to this message, but the average person is still totally locked into that concept of calories in, calories out, fat is bad, grain-based diet, regular meals, control your blood sugar, have a snack, and it's taken a long time to just even chip away at the big monsters of the food companies and the governmental advice that's been a disastrous failure.
Well, the thing I started following along with, and it was around the early 2000s when we started figuring out, and the computer helped us with this. Once I figured out how to get on Google, and I could start, you would find out that all of these studies that were done by these Harvard doctors and everything else was all bullshit. The abstracts wasn't telling the full story, because basically we read abstracts. We don't read full reports. And when you start looking at some of that stuff, and you go, wait a minute, this is wrong and that's wrong, and all the statins that were being handed out, I started looking at that, going, we're handing out a lot of statins, yet there's more heart disease than ever. Where's all this coming from? I've always been a guy that just questions everything, and I'm curious. That's how I got off of the bayou. That's how I ended up in Beverly Hills. I'm just curious. And it's like, well, wait, that doesn't seem to make sense. Why? And whenever you start digging into that, you start learning more and more that you weren't getting the real story.
Well, you're also testing this out yourself, doing your ultras and noticing the strategy of having fat in the off season and maintaining your weight while everyone else is gaining weight. Tell me a little bit about your immersion into the ultra scene and what that's all about.
I read an article sometime. It was when I was at Newman School. I was riding my bike a lot, and I read an article about a race called the Ram.
Oh, baby.
And
Race Across America, RAAM, probably the craziest athletic event we've seen in history, especially the old time where they had the solo nonstop race for an individual rider going from coast to coast. Now I think they got rid of that nonsense and they have teams or they have stop periods, but this used to be the gun went off on the West Coast,
right,
and whoever got to New York City or Washington, D.C. first was the winner. Crazy.
Yeah, and they had to follow a certain route. That was, and
well, that'd be fun if you get to pick a different route.
The solo thing, you can still do whatever you want. You could just go and go and go. The solos can still do whatever they want.
Oh, I thought they have like some mandatory periods because the guy died that fell asleep, the writer.
What they do is they have mandatory. It's not much though. They have mandatory after so many days. You can't go for like 4 hours or something because these guys would literally just amble down the road with no stopping whatsoever. But when they put these stops in, I crewed it for a friend and it was not much better. It's the same thing. They can basically go and go and go and go. But it's a race. It's a nonstop race across America. When people think of tough races, or tough things like climbing Everest or K2. This is tougher than that.
I agree. I would also like to say I crewed for Johnny G in the Ram in 1989, and that was the most difficult athletic event I've ever done. As a crew member sitting in a car, it was vastly more difficult than anything you could imagine. And it's absolutely amazing what these people put themselves through. And oh my gosh, it was stunning.
I'm shocked that more crews don't kill themselves because you're driving tired and you're worn out. And you start hallucinating as a crew member. And you can only imagine
as a crew member
what the guy's going through up there,
Yeah.
The crazy thing is that I read about Keepin Sears. There was, he had just set the record and the whole thing.
Yeah, this was this mild-mannered engineer guy from San Diego who was the first guy we'll give him credit for inventing basically the aero position that we see now. But I remember he commuted to work 40 miles each way every day.
That's right.
And so he rode his bike 80 miles a day, and then he got on his bike, and it was on Wide World of Sports. That's why it became such a fascination, was everyone saw this guy, and he'd just turn on his bike and pedal for, I believe his schedule was like 22 and a half hours of pedaling every day, a couple quick naps or whatever, and he got across the country in 8-9 days. The record time is around there. Unbelievable.
And the guy that was pushing him was a guy named Jonathan Boyer, who, if people want to know who Jonathan Boyer is, he is the guy who led the way for the eventual Lance Armstrong. Because
Greg LeMond. I mean, he was the first American to finish the Tour de France. And he was based in Europe, so he had to go away from America. There was no bike racing here. And he had that amazing distinction of being American finishing the Tour back in, before Le Mans, so it was 70s and early 80s or something.
Yeah, the guy goes down in history as one of the greats. He led the way for Greg LeMond after him. And also Hampstead.
Right, Andy Hampsten. All the Americans, the 7-Eleven team that came to the Tour was all inspired by Boyer finishing this thing.
Yeah, he was the first guy. I don't want to get into it, but he got into a little trouble at some point. What I'm told is he owned up to it. Something got out of hand. I don't want to really get into it, but he's always been a hero in my book. So I don't know how you feel about the guy, but after Jonathan Boyer got behind Keepin Sears. And I don't know if you remember this from that, but who was the announcer who was doing this?
Lampley.
Jim Lampley.
Yeah.
Jim Lampley is following this for NBC Sports. And Jim Lampley cannot believe what he's seeing. It's like these guys have been riding nonstop. They went for like 40 hours or 48 hours. And Jonathan Boyer pulls over and Lampley goes over to interview him. He goes, yeah, I can't, I have a big lead here. I'm going to hunker down for the night, this sort of thing. And it might have been after 24 hours. That was the deal. He goes, I've been out here for 24 hours. I have a big lead. I'm good to go. I'm going to hunker down for 5 or 6 hours. No one's going to catch me. And while he's doing the interview, Keepin Sears just zooms past him on the bike, and he says, sorry, Jim, got to go. And they went for another 24 hours. They went like 48 hours, and that became the legend. These guys pushed each other across the country. And at the end, Jonathan Boyer called it not a bike race, but a sleep deprivation competition.
Right.
And that's how he got that record. Jonathan pushed him across the country.
Well, this guy, Paul Solon from the Bay Area, he was a lawyer in San Francisco and had his day, and I believe he broke the record and said at one point, but he had some misfortune out on the road, and his neck muscles literally gave out on him.
His name was Shermer.
Oh, this is Paul Solon I'm talking about. But Paul Solon went into the emergency room somewhere in the Midwest because he could not lift his head up anymore.
Right.
And he had this spasm and this complete, the muscle tension in the neck when you're cycling is pretty severe for a 4-hour ride. And so this guy just fell apart, and he refused to be admitted to the ER. And instead he rigged up like a pulley weight system with fishing weights so that his helmet would be yanked back and anchored so that his head would be affixed to a forward position so he could see where he was biking, and he carried on and crossed the country in 8 days. Crazy stuff. Yeah, Shermer, who's now a well-known critical thinker. What do they call him? He's a skeptic.
Yeah.
He writes books. He's an extremely brilliant guy. But he was one of the early guys that won the race. I think he participated 6 times. He just told Lance Armstrong on his podcast. And these guys were a different breed. I mean, this is the farthest limit of human endurance that we've ever seen.
Shermer.
All those guys.
Shermer was on my show, the Fitness Confidential show, and they called it Shermer's neck. That's what he got the name because he invented it kept happening to him. He invented a way where he made a different thing. The first guy was duct taping his head to a stick that was duct taped around his body to hold his head up. Shermer came up with a different thing. It became known as Shermer's neck. And it's a thing. It's happened to me a couple of times. Not so bad, but when it happens, your neck muscles just cease to work. So you're doing whatever you can to keep your head up. I still have, right? I used it this morning, my little, right over there, my little neck exercise. I still do my neck exercises, even though I don't cycle much anymore.
Yeah.
Because you never know when you're going to go, oh, it's time to get back on that bike big time again. And
so what kind of ultras did you do? Were you going for multi-sport or running? What was your favorite stuff?
It was always bikes for me. I parked my car at some point in college after I got out of football. I played football. I was muscled up at like 225, 230.
What position?
I was a middle linebacker.
Oh, my goodness. At Tulane?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a big guy back then, just all muscled up. And after football, I gained weight really fast. I went up to like 275, 280. And I was getting a gut. And I said, I looked in the mirror one day and said, this is not going to happen. And I parked my car. And I would always just compartmentalize money. And I went, okay, I'm taking my gas money and my pizza money. I had pizza money in college. I'm going to take that and go buy all the bike I can buy. And I went out and bought a bicycle, about $100, and started riding. If I had to go anywhere, I went on a bike. I didn't have gas money in the car. And started riding the crap out of a bike and started reading bike magazines and that kind of thing. And that led to me finding ultra cycling. And, I always felt you had to be a rich guy to do it. But once I moved out to California in 91, I went, man, there's a lot of roads out here. There's a lot of open expanse. And maybe you don't have to be rich. Maybe you could do some of these races. So I started doing some of the 200-mile deals and all this kind of stuff. And that's kind of how it started.
You still do it?
No, I don't. After cancer, I did it a few more times. In 2008, I did the 508 again.
Oh, mercy.
I did a race across Oregon.
Just prove to yourself, I guess.
Yeah,
going for that 508 as a goal.
Yeah, I'm alive. I just want to make sure.
The 508 is a 508-mile race, and it's used as a qualifying race for the race across America. But it's a pretty big deal. Like the best guys are doing this. Yeah.
Yeah, people come from all around the world, and I did a bunch of that, and. At some point, work and business got in the way. And so lately I'm sitting around going, I need to do something. And I came up with this idea. I grew up on the longest bayou in the world. It's 100 miles long. And I started thinking, what if I just took a canoe or a kayak or something down that bayou, just end to end. And, where the bayou starts in my hometown, all the way down through the marshland into the Gulf of Mexico. And so I'm planning on doing that.
Oh, is this an organized event or is this a Vinnie challenge?
This is just a me challenge.
Oh my goodness! Yeah. I thought you were training for some event. This is awesome, man. So you're literally going to go from your hometown and paddle through this bayou with
and it's kind of a proof of, because I had to have my shoulder replaced 2.5 years ago. Old football injury just got really bad, and it's to prove that I'm back again. I can start training again. I got this Kayak Pro sitting right here in my office. I do a lot of training right here because I can't just go to the beach and paddle every day. And once a week, I go out to the Pacific Ocean. Stellar Kayaks gave me this beautiful kayak. Someone told me, it's like, that's like a $6,000 kayak. I'm like, really?
You're going to need something good if you're going to go 100 miles, man.
Yeah, they gave me like some top end, it's called the S18S. It's I'll show it to you when we walk out. This incredible kayak. They gave me the best kind of paddles and the whole thing. And I'm going to go down the bayou 100 miles in this really cool kayak.
So at our age, we're guys in our 50s, longtime athletes, and here you are with this new crazy goal that's giving you this motivation and this discipline. You think that's an important part of life? Do you recommend it for everybody? Is there any sort of downside to going for this extreme stuff where it might compromise your health, especially with the cycling that you transition out of? My contention is some of this stuff in the ultra scene, especially the way people are doing it now, where they're not monitoring their heart rate, they're feeding on carbs, and it could be an unhealthy endeavor. But the positive parts where you're lighting up, talking about your kayak, and have this compelling goal to keep you focused and drive to do something seems like a lot of good stuff for your life to balance all the hard work of the world's #1 podcaster,
Yeah, it's first off, I'm not challenging myself to finish it in some kind of speed time. I'm actually wearing a heart rate monitor. I'm keeping my heart rate at, between 65 and 70% of my aerobic capacity. So that's right around zone 2. At one point, I was going to do it this month, but I started ramping up the training too much, and I hurt my bad shoulder. So I had to take a week or two off. So I had to reassess. So I pushed it until after hurricane season. So I'm going to go in October and do it. Because I was trying to ramp up too fast, and even though I was keeping my heart rate correct, I ended up hurting my shoulder. I think a lot of people, I worry about these people who run these marathons all the time, back to back, and they never take any time off. I worry about these triathletes and so on and so forth, because we're seeing more heart disease from people just overtraining all the time. And it doesn't take that much to do what they're doing. And I've always said, if you want to get a good laugh, go pick up a triathlon magazine and read what they're telling you to do. It's crazy. They're trying to get mere mortals to do what these pros are doing, and it's wrong. I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but...
No, this is important stuff.
When you sit there and you go, well, wait a minute, you're training hard. No, I'm training smart. I'm not spending all day. I'm not worn out every day from being on a paddle erg, or when I go out in the Pacific Ocean... I'll even take breaks out there in the ocean and watch the dolphins go by and look at the seals for a while and, just kind of soak it in, because after you go through the whole cancer thing, you kind of just go F it in life. I'm just going to kind of soak this in a bit, and so I'm trying to enjoy myself with it. And it's taking a little more time than I thought, but I'm okay with that.
I think there's a big distinction there that's super important to understand, is where the difference between going out there and pushing yourself day after day after day, maybe not to exhaustion every single day, but you're in this mode that we call chronic cardio. Mark Sisson coined that term, and it's something that's so prevalent. And the difference between that and, let's say, setting this wonderful goal for October where you're going to try to paddle 100 miles. So you better be out there and doing some multi-hour practice sessions between now and October, but to do 4 of those per week and let it interfere with your life and your hormonal function and, your mood and your all those kind of things, that's where that point that we cross over and it becomes literally unhealthy. And you reference the heart problems in the endurance community. It's terribly tragic. I mean, these are my peers that I used to race with on the professional circuit and were the fittest guys on the planet. And now they're coming up with blown out hearts and surgeries and pacemakers and just, destruction of the most important organ in the body. And, largely attributed to overtraining and the scarring and the inflammation of the heart walls to where the electrical signaling gets screwed up. It's called AFib. And it's an epidemic among the most serious and disciplined and long-term athletes that have been going and going and going, especially the cyclists, because they can sit on a seat and work their heart harder than, let's say, a runner who's constrained by the gravity and stuff.
Absolutely. And by the way, I had AFib and had it corrected.
Do you think it came from endurance training or?
Possibly. I don't know. I had it and had it taken care of. They got it the first time. I've never had to take medication, but they had to go in and burn some of the nerve endings. We don't know how it came on or why it came on. got it fixed, and went back and raced after that. The key to me training for this is I don't overtrain on this. And every year I do a challenge where I do Mount Whitney every year.
Really? Every year?
Yeah. Well, I started doing it a few years ago, but every year since I started doing it. And the thing about doing Whitney is it keeps me honest to stay in shape, because it doesn't take a lot. You don't have to, I'm not doing some fastest known time or any crap like that. I'm going up, I'm looking around, I'm looking at the marmots, I'm looking at, I'm looking for a bear. I'd love to see a bear. I never see a bear,
Too high.
That kind of thing where, I'm just out there enjoying myself and looking around, and you get to the peak and you go, all right, I've made it another year. I guess I'm still alive, and just walk down. It takes 14 hours if you do it at a leisure pace. And, but, every weekend, Serena and me, we've been going out to Mount Wilson, and we'll climb that, and we'll do Baldy a couple of times. But it keeps me honest not to get out of shape, so it's not so important that I go do an ultra anymore and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Keep you honest also to not overdo it, because you got this one day to climb, and you better be rested and healthy before you start.
I'm trying to grab something here. I found this.
Oh, look at this! It's a certificate, listeners. Right. Very important looking.
Here's the thing: I don't keep medals. I don't keep certificates. I don't keep anything. The other day, I think I told you I painted this room.
Yeah, beautiful, bare, freshly painted walls you'll see in Vinny's studio.
I haven't even hung a photo or anything yet. But I was cleaning out stuff, and I pick up this thing, and I'm like, what is this? Why do I have this? Well, I don't even know what this is. It was back when Chris Kostman, we were talking about Chris Kostman earlier.
He's an organizer of the ultramarathon cycling and running events, a longtime guy in the community.
And by the way, I don't remember this. I didn't remember that this was a deal. But he and his girlfriend at the time, Chris, and her name was Deborah Kaplan. You remember Deborah at all? They used to own a thing called Planet Ultra, and Chris had to give it up in a lawsuit with her when they broke up. He had to give it up, but I pulled this out. I said, I got to keep this, and I got to show it to Chris. They apparently gave this to anyone who finished it in under. It was a 200-mile deal, the Solvang double. And
wow, that's fast. You did 200 miles in sub 10 hours. That's 20 miles an hour. That's 20 plus for 200 miles.
For 200 miles.
Wow, that's serious stuff right there. They should have given you a plaque instead of a piece of paper, man.
I didn't even know it was
Come
a deal.
on.
And they gave me this thing. I guess they sent it to me in the mail, and it sat in a drawer for I don't know, since 2002. So that's 16 years. And I looked at it and I went, I got to keep this and show it to Chris, because I'm sure he doesn't know this even exists. And, now I look at that, you're right. Whenever I would do the 508, I would always take pride in the fact, because I'm looking at this going 9:37, God, I was slow. I would always try to do the 508, the first 200 miles with a lot of climbing. I would always hustle to get it in 9 hours and 10 minutes, 9 hours and 12 minutes, 9 hours and 15, because the 200-mile mark was right at Town Pass. And if I got there, I would get there, I would be in second or third place. The first few guys did those first 200 miles.
Is this going across the Mojave? The route is from Santa Clarita, LA area to way out in the desert and back or something?
You go from, you start up on the 5 right there at Six Flags, basically. You go up through the Mojave. That first 200 miles, you probably do 10, 12,000 feet of climbing overall. And you get to the foot of Town Pass, and you go over Town Pass, and then you drop down into Death Valley. A lot of times you're doing 60, 65 miles an hour.
Wow.
And I used to like to do it in the daylight, because you would be doing that at night. And I didn't want to go down that pass that fast at night, so I would really hustle. But I think about those times now, when you think about people going sub 10 hours, most people, never do a 5-hour, 100-mile. I'm thinking about this now. that was like regular for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's flying. You're not screwing around and chit-chatting. You're in the drop position or whatever, pedaling hard to maintain. Remember that if you slow down a little bit, let's say on a 40-minute climb where you're only going 11 or 12, you have to make that up by hammering 24 on the flats. I mean, this is...
Or 30 or 29. Right. When you're looking down a lot of times, you're doing 20. To hold a 20-mile-an-hour plus pace, 21 for this, every time you look down, you're doing 26, 27. Because when you hit those climbs, you might be doing 14 or 15 or something. Or
take a leak. You just lost a minute. You got to make up and make that up over the next 10 miles, literally, by going a mile per hour.
Forever.
It's racing all day long on your bike. And then in terms of the 508, you're going for a finish time of, what's a good finish time?
Anything around 30, 32,
oh, mercy.
32, 33.
Yeah.
Something like that. And there's 30,000 feet of climbing in that thing, 35,000 feet of climbing. It's grueling. That's a tough... Race across Oregon is tough, too.
Oh, nice. That must be beautiful, though. Cascades and stuff.
Yeah, they're both beautiful. But that one ends on a big-time uphill. You go up to, not Mount Hood, but what's the other glacier? Is it Mount Hood?
Mount Bachelor, Mount Hood.
Can't remember which one we would end at, but that was another one where you would just go, oh, my God. This climbing just never ends.
Man, you've been out there doing some cool stuff, and now you've turned your attention to this documentary that I keep hearing about. It sounds very exciting. So let's pitch that. Let's see if people want to participate, huh?
Well, we did very well. I think we're at, I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but we're doing this on what's the date today? Like the 4th or 5th?
This is June of 2018.
It's still open. It goes, we will be collecting money through tomorrow at midnight. So this won't come out before then.
Well, you can watch it then. It's being crowdfunded, I guess. And so you're really maintaining control of the message. And what are you talking about in the show?
I'll tell you that in a second. But okay, right now we were going for $150,000. Right now, we're almost at $168,000. So we've surpassed our goal by 112. We're at 112% of our thing. Whenever these movies come out, these vegan movies like Cowspiracy or Forks Over Knives or,
What the Health.
Yeah. Whew. People come to me because I'm one of the lightning rods on the opposite side. Right, so they'll come to me, you need to do the opposite film. And I was like, no, that's not going to help either. It's kind of like what we were talking about at the beginning with Trump versus Hillary. Let's not swing back all the way in the other direction. Can we meet in the middle somewhere?
I love it, Vinny. Thank you. Yeah. My close friend is Rip Esselstyn, who's one of the prominent leaders of the vegan movement, Engine 2 diet. And we get together and we talk and we hash it out. And there's so much common ground that people fail to recognize.
Yeah.
Where he's saying a plant-based diet and plant strong and all these kind of things that I strongly agree with. And then there's some differences of opinion, which I recommend people resolve personally rather than getting into the dogma and debating things that they haven't tried. I love when you told your clients way back when, oh, you don't agree with me? Try it for a few weeks and we'll see if you're getting closer to that dress size. Yeah. And that pretty much steals the deal for most people.
Yeah. And, the Esselstyns, they're fine. And, the problem I have, Rich Roll is a good friend, so people go, how do you deal with Rich Roll? We have coffee together. We seem to be fine, And, when you think about what's going on, whenever this guy Kip puts these movies out, they're propaganda films. And, he gets people like Grieger who is willing to lie.
He's a doctor that's quoted on... These guys on What the Health were classic because they're just making these blanket statements like, you eat eggs and you're going to die. I just remember these things going, whoa, this guy's a doctor and he's putting himself on the camera? It's crazy.
They believe that is for the greater good or something. I'm not really sure what they're trying to do. But... Grieger said that if you eat an egg, that's like smoking 5 cigarettes. If you eat meat, you're going to have pus in your body. And my question is, where's all this pus? Because I'm apparently loaded with pus that I'm not aware of. They said in What the Health that eating dairy is institutionalized racism. That's in the movie. The guy Kip, the leader of the movie, who's very disingenuous, he goes, I was just out there looking for what's the best diet to do. Dude, you did Cowspiracy. You are already in that machine. Don't pretend you don't know what you're doing here. And don't go to the head of the AHA with a stained T-shirt with your man bun and throw a paper in his face and go, I have a paper here that says you're killing people, bro. You know, this is all BS.
Yeah, it's just like Michael Moore when he tried to crash Roger Smith, the CEO of General Motors, and he shows up at the high rise and he gets turned away and they say, turn the camera off. And he's like, I was mistreated. It's like, no, when you go try to crash the CEO's office, you're going to be turned away. And, you know, it's because you're a jerk and you're not going through the right channel. So I appreciate that comparison because that guy sort of rubbed me wrong where he's like the aw shucks type of documentary filmmaker who's just, you know, finding out about all these terrible things where it's a little more strategic and propaganda-ized. So,
well, while you're talking about Michael Moore, we're gonna watch something. If I can pull it up here, we're gonna watch something really.
I'm
fast.
looking at a screenshot of one of the most beautiful dogs that you'll ever see. If you go to Serenia Park, you ever go there with your dog? It's like the dog park. They took it over from humans, and dogs took it over.
Serenia,
yeah, just down the road, DeSoto and Wells.
Dog hiking.
Yeah,
She
yeah.
likes to go hiking.
But there's
She
a
doesn't
ton
like
of dogs
other
there.
She's a bitch that way.
People in Los Angeles love their dogs, man. They treat them right over at the park.
Yeah, I love my dog. Hit return and see what comes up here. I did this. I was walking through a hardware store.
It's called Fat, a documentary, and you can Google this now. It's on the Indiegogo. Was that a trailer there?
That's the original trailer. You can put it in your thing or not. But here's a little trailer I did as a spoof. I was walking through a hardware store, and I came up with, I saw this megaphone, and I bought it.
I saw that, yeah.
Did you see this?
Yeah, talking to the building. Oh, yeah. God, this guy's funny, people.
This.
Yeah.
I don't know why they love this, but I don't know if you'll be able to hear it on your mic.
Guys, I've been studying documentaries, and what I've learned is in order to do a proper documentary, you always have to be in the driver's seat of your car, speaking in a high tone. And then you have to go outside and do something. But you need an oversized shirt, a trucker ball cap, and a megaphone. So let's go yell at a building. Hey, I'm just standing here yelling at a building because this is what you do when you make a...
He says he's standing there yelling at a building with a megaphone. There's no one there. He's just talking.
It's very important. This building has done nothing to me, but I'm yelling at it because I'm making a documentary. Did I tell you I was making a documentary?
So, we did stuff like that. I think it was stuff like that that got people to get excited about giving money to the documentary because the one thing I'm not going to do is do what they do. I'm not going to just do a propaganda, go eat meat film. And the difference between, they're just preaching to the choir when they do What the Health or Cowspiracy or Forks Over Knives or any of those. I don't want to talk to the converted. I want to go and I want to ask Michael Grieger, how he can say that eating an egg will cause type 2 diabetes when there's no sugar present. I want to ask him how an egg is a 70 on the glycemic scale. These are facts that he puts out there on nutritionfacts.org or whatever his site is. I want to ask Esselstyn why all oils are bad across the board. I want to ask Barnard 1,000 questions. I want Dean Ornish to come on and answer. I want to hold these people's feet to the fire. I want to ask real questions. And then I want to get other people on. I want to get doctors from the other side on to say, look, I could go to the Kips of the world or the Rich Rolls of the world, which I'm sure are perfectly nice people. But I want to go to these doctors who are willing to lie to people. Just boldface say that an egg is the equivalent of eating 5 cigarettes a day. That means I smoked a pack for breakfast.
Every day.
Every day.
Oh, I had a 5-egg omelet. So 5-egg omelet. So I had 25.
Yeah. This doesn't make sense. I want to know where this is coming from. I want to show these Harvard doctors for what they are, the ones that come out with these studies and just lie for big food.
Yeah, Dr. Kate Shanahan talks about this too, that Harvard School of Public Health, the highest authority, got busted for covering stuff up from years ago where they falsified research and suppressed things relating to the dangers of refined vegetable oils. And it's happening every day, and it's hard for us to believe. It's hard to believe that your doctor doesn't know shit about diet, for example, or that these great resources are, completely unbiased and giving you the facts and the research because they're tweaking things. They got a lot riding on it. The people that are in that camp, especially in academia, they have to perpetuate the message. Otherwise, they're going to fall apart. That's why I love Dr. Tim Noakes for putting on the brakes and saying, hey, a lot of my life's work is refuted now by the new paradigm that you don't have to, live on carbs.
As a matter of fact, love Tim. Tim's been on the show a gazillion times. But the story I'm telling in my movie is what happened to Dr. Gary Fettke over in Tasmania, which if you think what happened to Tim in South Africa is bizarre and archaic, what happened to Gary Fettke is just otherworldly. Matter of fact, you should get him on your podcast. He's a good guy to have. I'm telling his entire story. It's going to be the cornerstone of this film. He was a guy that in Tasmania, his job became just chopping people's limbs off when they got type 2 diabetes. And he started paying attention to low-carb dieting, and he started telling some of these people to come in very fat and, with diabetes. And he was reversing the problem where he wasn't chopping as many limbs off. And someone brought him up to the board of medicine and said, this guy is not following protocol. And he went in and said, I'm saving people's lives and limbs and everything else. First, do no harm, right? And yeah, not so much. Your job is to chop limbs off, not do anything else. And that's where he is. He said to me in a Skype conversation just the other day off the air, I said, how are you doing, Gary? And he goes, I'm great. I haven't chopped a limb off in the past 8 weeks, because he's not a doctor and he stopped being a medical doctor. And now he's making his life work just trying to heal people. That's crazy, right?
It's a great story.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing it on the Fat documentary.
Yeah. We're going to get them all in, and we're going to hash it out.
Vinny, thanks for joining me, man. You're doing great stuff, and you're putting out a lot of info, a lot of content. Keep it up. I know it's a lot of work, but we appreciate you. Thanks for joining me on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Dun, 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 dun. Hi, it's Brad to talk about ancestral supplements. Question for you. How's it going with the critically important health objective of consuming some of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet, namely bone marrow, collagen, and nose-to-tail organ meats like liver, heart, kidney, and more? Yeah, how's it going? Pretty poorly? How did I guess? I have to admit the same. I'm sorry, folks. I've known for a long time, since Dr. Kate Shanahan and her wonderful book, Deep Nutrition, emphasized that this is a sorely missing element of the modern diet, but a huge part of the ancestral diet that made humans the healthy creatures that they are today. And now we have a fantastic and convenient solution from Ancestral Supplements, because they make New Zealand-sourced bone marrow and nose-to-tail organ meats, liver, heart, kidney, pancreas, spleen, and more, delivered in simple, convenient gelatin capsules. Oh my gosh, I love this product, and I love what this company's all about. Go on their website, ancestralsupplements.com, read one of the most impactful and inspiring mission statements you'll ever see from a company. Listen to how they describe their product. Traditional peoples, Native Americans, and early ancestral healers believed that eating the organs from a healthy animal would strengthen and support the health of the corresponding organ in the individual. The traditional way of treating a person with a weak heart was to feed the person the heart of a healthy animal. Sound hokey to you? I'm sorry, but this is extremely well supported, with scientific evidence confirming that these are the foods that our DNA evolved with and are sorely missing from the modern food supply. That's why Ancestral Supplements says that they're putting back in what the modern world has left out to return people back to strength, health, and happiness. And hey, if you're a clean living person that kind of doesn't like the idea of popping a bunch of synthetic vitamins in the name of health, going over to GNC and buying 12 bottles, this is an entirely different story. This is real food packaged conveniently so that you don't have to worry about your liver making skills or how to best cook a kidney. Just swallow the pills, man. I throw them in my smoothie every morning. So I'm taking about 4 or 5 capsules of the various ancestral supplement products. I'm throwing down the beef organs, the beef liver, the bone marrow. There's so many other ones on their absolutely fabulous and educational website. Thanks for trying it, ancestralsupplements.com. You will love it. Hey, let's talk about Tribali Foods. If you're super busy and you want a convenient meal to make in a short time, but you don't want to compromise great taste, gosh, doesn't that sound like a commercial? It is a commercial, but it's for something super awesome. And these are frozen organic beef and chicken patties and sliders with awesome creative flavors like Mediterranean, chipotle, umami with the mushroom mixed in, and also these sliders, chicken apple and pork sage. What you do is you take this frozen box, cut with the scissors, the beautiful little pre-made patty, drop it on the pan, cook it up, and it's ready in a few minutes. And this company is a real, live, authentic, girl power entrepreneur, small business success story, home kitchen inspired. Welcome everyone to the new world where the big multinational beasts that make garbage food are getting knocked off by people who care about what they eat and about their health. And Tribali was started by my friend Angela Mavridis in Southern California, lifelong family restaurant business member. She was a vegetarian for 35 years, and one day she had a steak, felt great, and started on this path of experimenting with creative ground beef recipes and flavorings in her kitchen. All her friends loved it. She was buying tons of ground meat from Whole Foods, and they're like, hey, what are you doing with this? So she brought them in a little sample. They loved it. They flew her to Texas to meet with the national buyer, and they said, literally, start a business and we will place a large order. So this is a wonderful small business success story with love and attention to everything that goes into this product. Delicious, totally keto friendly. Go look at the pork mini sliders. We're talking 1 gram of carbs, 11 grams of protein, 17 grams of fat, and you get 15% off. Just visit tribalifoods.com, TRIBALI, and enter Get Over Yourself in the coupon field. And you are good to go. Shipped directly to your door, cold packed, frozen stuff, thawed out in a day, and you have quick dinner, quick lunch. And also available at finer stores like Whole Foods, Whole Dudes, Nugget, Natural Grocers, Super Targets, and launching into Walmart as well. Good job. Go, girl. TribaliFoods.com.